welcome to the deep dive. If you are joining us today, you're probably someone who likes to, pull apart complex ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. People who are looking for those hidden blueprints.
Right, exactly. The blueprints that explain why we think and act the way we do. And, well, that is exactly our mission today.
It's a great one.
It really is. We are looking at a huge stack of philosophical and historical material centered on the 13th century Persian mystic and poet Rumi.
Yeah, specifically we're decoding one of his most famous parables from his masterwork, the Masnavi.
Right, the story of the lion and the rabbit. Sometimes translated as the hare, but we'll stick with rabbit today.
Sounds good.
The goal here is to show you how this 13th century tale, which has been masquerading as a simple children's fable for hundreds of years.
Oh, totally masquerading.
Right. It actually contains this radical, incredibly sophisticated map of your own mind.
It really is a remarkable text. I mean, the Masnavi is this massive 6-volume collection of spiritual teaching stories.
And it was written during a pretty intense time, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. A time of immense historical trauma. The Mongol invasions were literally tearing through the Islamic world.
Wow, okay.
So Rumi wasn't writing, light entertainment to distract people. He was writing with this intense urgency.
To wake people up.
Exactly. To wake people up to the reality of their own internal mechanics. He used these fables as psychological mirrors.
Okay, let's unpack this, because typically when you and I hear a story about a massive, terrifying king and a tiny, clever peasant, you know exactly how the script is supposed to play out.
Right. It's the classic David and Goliath trope.
Exactly. The big guy has all the brute power, the little guy has nothing but his wits, and you just spend the entire narrative rooting for the little guy.
You want him to pull off some brilliant trick and take the tyrant down.
Yeah, it's like the most deeply ingrained bias in human storytelling.
We really do have this instinctive, comforting gravitation toward the small and the clever over the big and the brutal.
We treat it like a universal law of justice,
Yeah.
right? Like brains should just naturally triumph over brawn.
And we assume the underdog is inherently morally superior.
But when you step into Rumi's framework,
Yeah.
that entire narrative script gets fed into a wood chipper.
It really does.
If you actually pull back the layers of this specific fable, the quote-unquote hero of the story is actually the villain.
Yeah, that's the twist.
And the terrifying, tyrannical villain is exactly the part of yourself that you should be rooting for.
It is the ultimate philosophical Trojan horse. I mean, you think you're reading a bedtime story about woodland creatures.
But you're actually reading a terrifyingly accurate dissection of human consciousness.
Exactly.
So let's set the stage with the fable, exactly as it's presented on the surface. I want you to picture a lush, beautiful meadow, a total paradise.
Just idyllic.
Right. It's filled with animals living in what should be perfect harmony, but their peace is completely shattered.
Because there's a powerful tyrannical lion who hunts them every single day.
Right. It's a state of absolute unpredictable nightmare. The animals are just living in constant terror.
And think about what that does to a population, It's a state of perpetual ambient anxiety.
They can't even function.
No, they can't enjoy the meadow, they can't graze, they can't raise their young because they're constantly looking over their shoulders.
They're just waiting for this overwhelming, arbitrary force to strike. It paralyzes them.
Right.
So, out of sheer desperation, the animals call a council. They get together and decide they have to negotiate some kind of peace treaty with this monster.
They need a way out.
Exactly. They approach the lion and make a desperate pitch. They say, Your Majesty, this chasing and running, it exhausts you and it terrifies us.
What if, from now on, you never have to hunt again?
Right. In exchange, every single day, we'll hold a lottery among ourselves. We'll send you one animal, chosen at random, to be your meal.
You get to rest on your throne, and the rest of us get to live in peace until our time comes.
Now, on the surface, this sounds like a pretty bleak, pragmatic political compromise.
Yeah, very bleak. But Rumi uses this negotiation to launch directly into one of the most profound philosophical debates of his era.
And honestly, of our era too.
Truly. The animals aren't just arguing for convenience here, they're presenting a deeply entrenched philosophical position.
The absolute reliance on predestination and divine providence.
Exactly.
They are essentially telling the lion to stop trying so hard. They're like, look, God provides for everyone, even those who don't or can't work.
Right. They argue that by striving for food, by running around the jungle trying to control your own destiny, you're actually showing disrespect to God's power.
Like, don't you trust that God will feed you? They're making an argument for absolute passivity.
They're advocating for a highly fatalistic form of trust.
Fatalistic, yeah.
The core of their argument is that human effort is fundamentally useless. It's an illusion.
And beyond being an illusion, it's arrogant.
Yes, because it assumes you, a mortal creature, can somehow alter what has already been divinely decreed.
Their logic basically says if you're meant to be fed, the food will just arrive.
And if you're meant to starve, no amount of hunting will save you. Therefore, the only truly pious action is inaction.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because, while looking at the arguments laid out in the text, the lion actually sounds like the incredibly reasonable one.
Oh, he absolutely does. He pushes back hard.
The lion replies, God gave us arms and legs and a mind. He put a ladder in front of us so we can climb it.
To just sit and say God will do everything isn't faithful, it's just lazy.
Yeah, the text literally has the lion saying, you have feet, why pretend to be lame? You have hands, why hide them in shame?
It's a great point. The lion represents the principle of active engagement. He is the embodiment of striving.
Right.
What's fascinating here is that he grounds his argument in a very famous foundational teaching from the Prophet Muhammad.
Oh, right, the camel story.
Exactly. There's a well-known historical account where a Bedouin man asks the Prophet if he should leave his camel untied and simply trust in God to keep it from wandering off into the desert.
And the prophet's response was sharp and direct, wasn't it?
Very direct. He said, trust in God, yet tie the camel's leg.
Trust in God, yet tie the camel's leg. That is just brilliant. It perfectly bridges the gap between surrender and responsibility.
It completely dismantles the animal's argument. True reliance on the divine does not mean abandoning the faculties, the skills, and the opportunities you've been given.
The lion is arguing that our tools, our physical strength, our intellect, our ambition, are themselves divine gifts.
Right. If you refuse to use them under the guise of trusting God, you're actually rejecting the very gifts you were given to navigate the world.
The effort itself is a form of worship.
Exactly.
But the animals absolutely refuse to accept this. They're determined to prove to the lion that striving is futile, that tying the camel is just a waste of rope.
And to do this, they tell a story within the story.
Yeah, they recount the tale of a man who goes to visit King Solomon. Now, in this tradition, Solomon isn't just a wise king, right?
Oh, he has mystical powers, including dominion over the wind.
Okay, so this man bursts into Solomon's court, and he is pale, trembling, just absolutely terrified.
In a total panic.
Solomon asks him what's wrong, and the man says, I just saw the angel of death in the marketplace, and the angel gave me this terrifying, wrathful look. He's coming for me.
He is desperately trying to change his fate. He begs Solomon to use his power over the wind to transport him as far away as possible.
The Hindustan, right, so he can escape the angel of death.
Right.
And Solomon pities the man. He summons the wind, and instantly the man is swept away to the far-off lands of Hindustan. Crisis averted, right?
You'd think so.
But later that day, Solomon runs into the angel of death in the marketplace. Solomon stops him and says, why were you glaring at that poor man earlier? Why did you look at him with such anger?
And the angel of death replies, I wasn't looking at him with anger. I was looking at him in absolute astonishment.
Astonishment?
Yes, astonishment, because the angel knew what his divine orders were.
Exactly. The angel says, God had commanded me to take that man's soul today in Hindustan. But when I saw him here in your court, I couldn't figure out how he was possibly going to get all the way to Hindustan in time for his own death.
And yet, he made it.
It's just a brilliant, chilling sub-narrative.
It really is. The man's desperate, frantic effort to escape his fate is the exact mechanism that delivered him directly into it.
So the animals use this story as their ultimate trump card against the lion. They say, you see, no human effort can outrun divine providence.
To struggle against the decree is pointless. Just sit back, accept the lottery, and let us bring you your breakfast.
Wow.
You have to look at what the animals are actually doing here. They are weaponizing a sophisticated theological concept to justify their own desire for an easy, passive existence.
They want the illusion of control. A lottery is terrifying, yes, but it is orderly.
It's predictable.
They'd rather have the certainty of a scheduled death than live with the unpredictable chaos of the lion's daily hunt.
Exactly.
And what happens when a philosophy of doing absolutely nothing goes up against a hungry lion?
Well, surprisingly, after pages of this high-level philosophical debate, the lion caves.
He gets worn down by the sheer volume of the animal's arguments. Or, I don't know, perhaps he just realizes the convenience of breakfast in bed.
Right. He abandons his nature, agrees to the lottery system, and steps back from active striving.
This is the critical turning point of the fable, isn't it?
It is. The lion, who is the symbol of immense power, agency, and active engagement with the world, has compromised his fundamental nature.
He's accepted a system of passive waiting.
Yeah.
So the lottery begins.
Yeah.
Every day, the animals draw lots, and every day one unfortunate animal solemnly walks off to be devoured.
It's a grim, bureaucratic system of death, but society functions.
Until one day, the lottery falls on the rabbit.
And this is where the friction begins.
The rabbit refuses to go. He tells the meadow, "I am not doing this. How long must we suffer under this tyrant?"
And you might expect the other animals to cheer him on, but instead they absolutely panic.
They turn on him completely. They start shouting, "Everyone else sacrificed themselves for the collective good, and now you're going to ruin the treaty."
You're going to bring the lion's wrath back down on all of us.
Notice the psychology of the crowd here. The society of animals has normalized its own destruction.
They've accepted their doom as a collective reality, and anyone who challenges that status quo, even to save them, is immediately perceived as a dangerous radical.
They defend the very system that is killing them.
They mock him relentlessly. They look at his size and say, "You, a tiny rabbit, how can you possibly defeat the king of the jungle?"
Know your place, keep your dreams in your own rabbit space.
But the rabbit just brushes them off.
He tells them he has a secret plan that will free them all. They beg him to share it, but he refuses, citing the strategic advantage of secrecy, and finally sets off toward the lion's den.
But importantly, he does not rush. He weaponizes time.
He takes the most leisurely stroll imaginable. He dawdles, he takes naps.
By the time he finally arrives at the lion's den, it is well past feeding time.
The lion is starving, pacing furiously, tearing up the earth, roaring about the betrayal of the animals.
Finally, the rabbit approaches, throws himself into the dirt, and begins this masterful performance of trembling, pitiful terror.
The manipulation begins. He immediately plays to the lion's expectations of dominance.
Right.
The rabbit says, "Oh, great king, please forgive me. The animal sent me with your meal hours ago. I brought a friend with me, another rabbit, 3 times my size, fat, soft, a feast fit for royalty.
But on our way here, we were ambushed. Another lion jumped out of the bushes.
A rival claimant to the throne."
Exactly.
The rabbit spins a massive, elaborate lie. He says, "This rogue lion grabbed my fat friend. I told him, 'Stop, this is the king's meal,' but this other lion just laughed."
He said, "Go tell your so-called king that I am the true ruler of this jungle now. If he wants his food, he has to come and take it from me."
The rabbit is demonstrating extraordinary psychological insight here, isn't he?
It's brilliant. He doesn't challenge the lion's physical strength. That would be suicide.
Instead, he targets the lion's pride.
He targets his ego. By inventing an imaginary rival, the rabbit creates a scenario where the lion feels his identity and status are deeply threatened.
And the lion falls for it completely. His pride is triggered instantly.
Right.
He doesn't stop to verify the story.
No, he demands the rabbit take him to this usurper right now.
So the rabbit leads the furious lion through the jungle. They walk until they reach a deep, clear well.
The rabbit stops a few feet away, shivering, and says, "He's down there, Your Majesty, but I can't come any closer. My legs are shaking. My soul is withdrawn."
I am too terrified to look at him again.
The lion, feeling utterly superior and protective of his tiny informant, scoops the rabbit up in his massive paws.
He says, "Do not fear, I will protect you." And together they step to the edge and peer over into the dark water of the well.
And what happens next is the climax of the fable.
The lion looks down into the smooth water and sees his own reflection. But because he's holding the rabbit, the reflection staring back at him is a massive, terrifying lion clutching a rabbit.
Consumed by rage and wounded pride, the lion is convinced he is looking at the rival who stole his meal and insulted his crown.
He roars into the well, and the echo roars back at him, confirming his fury.
He just loses his mind.
He drops the actual rabbit, hurls himself into the well to destroy the rival, and plunges to his death, drowning in the dark water.
It is a sudden, violent, almost pathetic end to the tyrant.
And the rabbit casually dances back to the meadow, clapping his hands and shouting to the animals, "Good news! The hellish dog has returned to his hell."
The animals are astounded, treating him like a fairy or an angel.
And if you're reading this as a standard fable, that is exactly where the book closes.
Right. If you stop there, you walk away with a perfectly functional, albeit basic, moral lesson.
The traditional takeaway is that God often chooses the weak to confound the strong.
It teaches us that outward appearances, the lion's imposing physical dominance versus the rabbit's insignificance, they aren't the true measure of a being's power.
Brains beat brawn, the arrogant are laid low by their own hubris, and the underdog wins.
It's a satisfying moral.
We all love that story. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you were listening to this right now, I need you to completely forget everything we just said about the moral of the story.
Forget all of it.
Because if you stop there, you have entirely missed Rumi's actual philosophical payload.
Absolutely.
What if I told you that this story is not about woodland animals forming a treaty? What if this story is a direct representation of what is happening inside your brain at this very second?
This is where we shift into Rumi's radical reinterpretation. In his framework, the external world of the narrative is always a direct reflection of the internal psychological and spiritual landscape of the individual.
Right. To understand the true meaning, we have to completely redefine the cast of characters. Let's flip the script.
Let's do it.
In this psychological reading, the lion is not the villain. The lion is you, or rather, the best part of you. The lion represents the higher self.
Yes. In the mystic tradition, the lion is the royal soul. It is the divine spark within every human being.
Think back to the lion's argument earlier in the story.
Right. He was the one advocating for growth, for climbing the ladder, for using our divine gifts to strive and engage with the world.
The higher self is capable of immense power, courage, and spiritual evolution.
And what about our hero? What about the cute, clever little underdog who freed the meadow? Who is the rabbit?
The rabbit is the ego. In the Islamic mystical tradition, this is known as the nafs.
Specifically, the commanding self. And it's important to note, this is not the ego in the Freudian sense of navigating reality.
Right, this is the inner beast. The nafs is the part of us that is fundamentally obsessed with separation, survival, status, and differences.
It is the constant chattering voice in your head that says, what about me? Am I getting enough credit? How do I look compared to them? How do I win?
When I first grasped this, it completely rewired how I view my own thought processes.
Really? How so?
I started thinking about the ego, the rabbit, like a computer virus.
Oh, I like that.
Right. If you think of your higher self, the lion, as this massive, state-of-the-art supercomputer with practically limitless processing power, the rabbit is just a tiny microscopic string of malicious code.
That makes perfect sense.
A 1 kilobyte virus doesn't have the brute force to overpower a supercomputer, but it doesn't need to.
It uses tricky, deceptive logic to hijack the operating system from the inside.
Exactly. Slowly corrupting the computer's perception of reality until the supercomputer uses its own massive power to destroy itself.
That is an exceptionally accurate modern metaphor for how Rumi describes the nafs. The ego cannot overpower the higher self by brute force.
If it tried a direct assault, the higher self would crush it instantly.
Therefore, the ego relies entirely on deception, distraction, and subtle manipulation. And Rumi's description of this inner rabbit is anything but cute.
No, it's pretty dark.
The text refers to the ego as a hell, a beast of dread. Rumi writes that the ego has swallowed a world, yet still with a roar keeps shouting out, "Is there any more?"
Is there any more?
Oh,
Wow. That is the perfect distillation of modern anxiety and consumerism, isn't it?
it really is.
The ego is an insatiable void. It's a bottomless pit that masquerades as a helpful, rational protector.
The rabbit tells the other animals, "Don't worry, I will save you," but it's actually driving the entire internal ecosystem toward destruction.
Exactly. The ego always presents itself as your ally. It tells you that it's keeping you safe from humiliation.
It promises that if you just win this argument on the internet or get that promotion over your colleague or buy that specific car, you will finally feel secure and complete.
But it is a structural lie.
The ego's appetite is infinite because it's attempting the impossible. It's trying to fill a profound, infinite spiritual void with finite, material, or psychological substitutes.
Okay, so let's look at the climax of the story again, but through this new psychological lens.
Okay.
The lion, the higher self, was not defeated by the rabbit's physical strength. He was defeated by a corrupted operating system.
He was defeated by a trick of perception.
Which brings us to the most important symbol in the story, the well. Why does the lion jump into the well?
To understand the well, we have to explore the absolute bedrock of Rumi's metaphysics.
Let's do it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to understand a concept called wada al-wujud.
The unity of existence.
Yes. This is the single radical premise upon which this entire philosophy balances.
Right.
Wada al-wujud proposes that only God possesses true independent existence. Everything that we perceive in the universe as being separate from us, you, me, the microphone in front of me, the trees outside, the distant galaxies, all of it is actually God's self-manifestation.
I want to pause here because this can easily be misconstrued. How does this differ from simple pantheism, like the idea that the tree itself is God?
It is a crucial distinction. Pantheism essentially says the universe and God are identical.
Okay.
Wadada Wujud says the tree has no independent reality outside of the divine reality manifesting in the form of a tree.
A common analogy is the ocean and the waves, right?
Yes, exactly. If you look at the surface of the ocean, you see countless individual waves. They look distinct, they crash into each other. Some are big, some are small.
But if you look deeper, there are no independent waves.
There is only the ocean temporarily taking the shape of waves. We are the waves.
So what does this mean for our day-to-day perception?
It means that the separation we feel between ourselves and other people is a perceptual illusion.
It feels incredibly painfully real to our senses, but metaphysically it is false.
Exactly.
Okay, bring this back to the well. When the lion looks over the edge into the dark water, what is he actually seeing?
He is seeing his own reflection, but because his perception is corrupted by the rabbit's lies, he perceives his own reflection as an external enemy.
He sees a rival that must be destroyed.
And the staggering realization here is that this is exactly what you and I do every single day.
Because we are all branches of the same tree, all waves of the same ocean.
Right. Whenever we look at someone else, we are ultimately looking at a reflection of the unified reality.
But the ego, the rabbit, stands next to us, whispering in our ear, convincing us that the person in front of us is separate, alien, and a threat.
It is the psychology of projection, deeply embedded in mysticism. When we feel intense, disproportionate anger towards someone else, we are almost always seeing our own unacknowledged darkness.
Our own flaws, our own reflection in them.
The traits that trigger us the most in other people are usually the exact traits we refuse to accept in our own shadow.
Let me stop you there because this is a tough pill to swallow.
It is.
Are you telling me that when I am furious at a coworker for being impossibly stubborn, or when I'm screaming inside my car at someone who just cut me off in traffic, I am just the lion roaring at the water?
That is exactly the diagnosis Rumi is giving us. When you attack the other, you are attacking a phantom created by your own unhealed ego.
That is deeply confronting, and frankly, it highlights how exhausting human conflict is.
It really does.
If you follow the logic of well, every time we try to take someone else down, every time we attack the enemy, we are actually attacking ourselves.
We are the supercomputer corrupting our own hard drive.
The lion literally drowns himself trying to kill a phantom that only exists on the surface of a mirror.
This is what we might call a spiritual autoimmune disease.
Oh, a spiritual autoimmune disease.
The ego thrives on conflict. It requires an other to define itself against. The ego's core operating principle is, I am me because I am not you, and I need to prove I am better than you.
But if Wadat al-Wujud is the true nature of reality, if unity is the fundamental truth, then attacking another person is literally attacking your own body.
You are destroying the host organism to satisfy the virus?
A spiritual autoimmune disease. That phrasing is going to stick with me.
It's powerful.
But this brings up a mechanical question. How does the rabbit, this tiny little virus of an ego, manage to get the massive, powerful lion to the edge of the well in the first place?
Right, because the rabbit didn't physically drag him there.
No, it talked him there. It used what Rumi calls fake logic. It used the intellect.
This is where we run into Rumi's intense, almost aggressive critique of human intellect and reasoning.
The rabbit traps the lion with whys and hows. He spins this incredibly elaborate, highly logical-sounding narrative about rival kings, stolen territory, and challenges to the throne.
He pulls the lion out of his natural, intuitive state of power and drags him deep into the weeds of philosophical argument and wounded pride.
Right. Rumi was deeply suspicious of conventional logic and intellectualization when it came to matters of the soul and spiritual liberation.
He saw the intellect as a tool that is highly useful for navigating the material world-building bridges, negotiating treaties, but completely disastrous when applied to spiritual realities.
The text explicitly warns the reader. You get lost in philosophical arguments and try to solve everything with your brain. That itself makes your ego fatter and you fall deeper.
Hang on, I have to push back on this. This feels incredibly anti-intellectual.
It can sound that way, yeah.
Are we saying we should just abandon our capacity for logic entirely? How do we function in the world if we stop analyzing problems? To say that trying to think our way out of problems makes the ego fatter sounds like a recipe for deliberate ignorance.
It's not a call for ignorance, I promise. It's a call for knowing which tool to use for which job.
Okay, explain that.
The intellect is a tool of dissection. How does logic work? It analyzes, categorizes, divides, and separates.
It breaks things down into smaller parts to understand them.
That is wonderful for science. But when you apply a tool of separation to a spiritual reality that is fundamentally based on unity, you break the reality.
Ah, because the intellect's very nature is to create boundaries.
Exactly. The intellect is the ego's absolute favorite playground. When you try to logic your way out of a spiritual disconnection, you are using the very mechanism that the ego controls.
You cannot think your way to spiritual liberation because thought inherently reinforces the illusion of a separate thinker.
You cannot solve a crisis of the soul with a spreadsheet or a debate.
That is so counterintuitive for how you and I live today. We live in an era of information overload.
We really do. We think if we just read enough self-help books, or listen to enough optimization deep dives, or articulate our arguments perfectly in a debate, we will somehow achieve enlightenment or peace.
But Rumi is saying that by doing that, we are just feeding the rabbit. The rabbit is eating all those books and getting huge.
This raises an important question, which leads to one of the most dangerous psychological traps in the modern world: the spiritual ego.
Oh man, the spiritual ego. Talk to me about that.
Look at what the rabbit does after the climax of the story. The rabbit has just orchestrated the murder of the king through manipulation and deceit.
He dances back to the meadow, victorious.
But notice what he says to the animals. He suddenly adopts an attitude of extreme performative humility.
He says, I didn't do anything. I'm just a weak little rabbit. It was all God's doing.
He steals the fatalistic language of the animals from the very beginning of the fable.
He weaponizes piety. He uses the language of surrender and divine will to mask his ultimate triumph of ego and manipulation.
This is the perfect illustration of how the ego can adopt spiritual aesthetics to hide its own arrogance and maintain its grip on your consciousness.
So the ego realizes that brute force won't work, so it puts on yoga pants and starts quoting mindfulness mantras to prove it's better than everyone else.
Precisely. You can meditate for 3 hours a day, you can study sacred texts for decades, but if you are using that meditation or that knowledge to secretly feel superior to people who don't meditate,
Your rabbit hasn't died.
your rabbit is just wearing a monk's robe.
Look how detached and enlightened I am compared to all these stressed out ordinary people.
That isn't enlightenment. That is just the rabbit roaring.
The ego co-opts the spiritual journey. It turns enlightenment into just another metric of success, another trophy to put on the shelf to prove how special, unique, and separate you are from the rest of the ocean.
So what does this all mean for us? This is the crucial pivot of this entire deep dive. If we are the lion, and we have this incredibly tricky, insatiable, shape-shifting rabbit living inside our operating system, constantly using our own intellect and even our own spiritual practices against us, how do we survive?
How do we keep ourselves from jumping into the well?
The answer lies in a core concept of Rumi's spiritual path: polishing the mirror.
Polishing the mirror of the heart. What does that mean, practically?
We established earlier that the lion saw his reflection in the well, but failed to recognize it as himself. Why?
Because his perception was fundamentally clouded by the ego's narrative.
Rumi teaches that human hearts are designed to act as mirrors. When a mirror is clean, it perfectly reflects the divine light. It reflects the truths of unity, the Wadad al-Wujud.
But over a lifetime, the mirror of the heart becomes covered in rust.
And the rust is our worldly desires, our grudges, our attachments, our constant need to be right, the endless, exhausting chatter of the rabbit.
Yes, when the mirror is rusted over, it reflects a distorted, fragmented reality.
It shows us a world filled with enemies, threats, and terrifying separation.
But if we commit to the daily work of polishing the mirror through spiritual discipline, through acts of genuine selflessness, through the relinquishing of the ego's demands, the rust is slowly cleared away.
Imagine if the lion had approached the well with a polished heart.
He would have looked over the edge, seen the massive, terrifying lion staring back at him, and instead of roaring in anger, he would have recognized, oh, that's just me.
You would have seen completely through the illusion. The well wouldn't have been a death trap. It would have been a moment of profound revelation.
Recognizing the illusion of separation is the only way to short-circuit the ego's tricks.
But how do we actually deal with the rabbit itself? We established that we can't out-argue him.
Right. If I try to use logic to defeat my ego, the ego just gets fatter.
So what is the mechanism for defeating the inner beast?
You cannot logic the ego into submission. The only path forward, according to Rumi, is to embrace the death of the rabbit.
But this death is not achieved through intellectual combat.
No, it is achieved through love.
We need to be incredibly clear here because modern English does a terrible disservice to the word love.
Oh, it really does.
When Rumi talks about love in this context, he is not talking about romance. He's not talking about a warm, fuzzy feeling you have for your family or a nice sunset.
Not at all. In Rumi's theology, love is a terrifying ontological force.
It is the fundamental gravity of the universe that pulls all manifestations back toward their divine source.
It is an overwhelming, destructive energy. It destroys because its very nature burns away everything that is false, everything that is illusory.
Fire. It's the metaphor of fire. Love is the flame that burns away the false self.
You don't sit down at a negotiating table with a rabbit.
You let the absolute, consuming fire of divine love burn the rabbit to ash.
You have to bypass the intellect and connect directly to the source. The wisdom here is that if you are truly rooted in the reality of unity, if you are connected to the divine source through this consuming love, you will never fall prey to the petty, logical games of the ego.
The ego requires darkness and the illusion of separation to survive.
When you flood the system with the overwhelming light of divine unity, the ego doesn't fight back. It simply dissolves. Its logic cannot hold up to the light.
It makes me think of trying to convince someone that a shadow on the wall is a real physical monster.
That's a good analogy.
You can argue about the shape of the shadow, you can debate its motives, you can write essays about how dangerous the shadow is.
But the moment someone shines a spotlight directly on it, the shadow just vanishes. There is no monster to fight.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the process.
So let's trace the massive journey we've taken today.
We started this hour looking at what seemed to be a simple, almost Disney-esque fable about a mean lion and a clever rabbit making a treaty in a meadow.
And we peeled back the layers to discover a profound, intricate psychological map of human consciousness.
The lion is not the villain. The lion is your potential for growth, your higher self striving to engage with the divine reality.
The rabbit is not the hero. The rabbit is the deceptive, insatiable ego using fake logic and fake piety to keep you trapped in a state of separation.
And the well is the ultimate illusion. The illusion that the enemies we fight out in the external world are anything other than our own unhealed, unpolished reflections.
It completely reframes how we must interact with our reality and with each other.
It really does. So for you listening right now, taking this into your week, the next time you feel the urge to roar at an enemy,
the next time you feel that intense, hot, ego-driven rage at someone who has wronged you or embarrassed you or violently disagreed with you on the internet,
I want you to pause, stop and ask yourself, are you actually fighting a monster or are you just staring into a well?
Or are you letting the rabbit trick you into drowning yourself in your own reflection?
It is a profound and necessary check on our own behavior.
But before we finish, I want to leave you with one final, truly mind-bending thought to mull over on your own time.
Go for it.
We have to remember Rumi's ultimate premise, wadat al-wujud, unity of existence. If this premise is true, it means that absolutely everything is a divine manifestation.
Yep.
Even the things that challenge us, even the things that obstruct us, even the things that cause us pain.
Right.
If everything is God in disguise, functioning as part of a unified whole, then the rabbit, the ego that traps us, lies to us, and manipulates us, must also be a necessary divine instrument.
Whoa.
Think about the mechanics of the story. If the rabbit had never rebelled, if the ego hadn't used its trickery, the lion would have just stayed in the meadow.
He would have comfortably eaten his daily fatalistic ration, never challenged, never growing, and never forced to confront his own reflection.
He would have stayed asleep to his true nature forever. Perhaps the ego isn't an enemy to be destroyed in a traditional combative sense.
Perhaps it is the exact psychological friction we need.
Without the darkness, we have no capacity to understand the light. Without the rabbit pushing the lion to the absolute terrifying edge of the well, the lion would never be forced to look down and face himself.
It is the ego that creates the necessary suffering that finally, ultimately forces us to wake up.
So when you see the peasant outwitting the king, maybe the goal isn't to figure out who is good and who is bad. Maybe the goal is to realize they are both doing exactly what they are supposed to do, pushing you toward the realization that they are just two sides of the exact same mirror.
A mirror we are all still learning to polish. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep polishing that mirror, everyone.